Thanks for tuning in to the C-Suite Cyber Podcast, brought to you by Watchdog Cyber. Join us as we explore the critical intersection of business and cybersecurity, helping you protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Whether you're a CEO, a CFO, or hold any other executive role in your company, the C-Suite Cyber Podcast is your go-to resource for staying ahead in today's digital age. Hey everyone, it's Dan and Aaron again with Watchdog Cyber, coming back to you with the C-Suite Cyber Podcast. Dan, how you doing today?
Fabulous. I got my sunlight suspenders on. They move around. Guess I got to change my blinds in my window. That's all. I have a good view though, so.
Nice. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about, if we were a hacker,
okay,
what type of recon would we do to potentially hack you, right?
Sure.
And I think it's an important topic because a lot of folks, they've got kind of a false sense of security, especially in the SMB space, right? We see all these big companies, AT&T the other day, Mr. Cooper, Loan Depot, Ticketmaster, like all these companies, right? We see all the big ones, but we don't really hear too much about smaller companies. And I think because of that, a lot of smaller companies are like, well, I'm not really a target. That's just not the case. And I think you and I both know that.
Yeah. I think people don't really know who's doing the attacks, right? And these are coming from North Korea, Russia, Ukraine, in the Middle East. And some of those people that are doing this are probably making 10 grand a year, right? So if they can get 25 grand out of somebody, they're living a good year. It doesn't always have to be a $5 million ransom. I mean, that's not what they're looking for. And a small business is not going to pay that kind of money, but they will pay 50 grand. They will pay 250 grand. Right.
Yeah.
And in the community, I live where I live, it's a small community, right? These businesses would not want the message out that they got breached and that the people that live in the village and in the city, now all their information is on the dark web, right? Some of them probably don't know what the dark web is, but
right.
But they're going to have to know and be told by the person that got breached. The company is going to have to notify them, sorry, we got breached and all your information's out on the dark web now. It's just bad publicity, right? You don't want to do that. That company's going to lose trust in the community if that happens. So there's just a perceived low risk for small businesses, and it's not that way. So I wish more people would come out and say they had gotten breached. I don't know, was it 54% of small businesses are getting breached? I mean, that's a big number, right?
Yeah.
That's a big number. And I just wish they were more open to bringing that out so that other businesses could start to protect themselves.
Yeah, I think we talk about that all the time. I think it's a huge disservice to the business community by keeping a breach, private. Yes, right. I'll agree with you. It's frustrating. It's embarrassing. It's saddening.
Right.
It's the worst. One of the worst things that you'll ever experience. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But cybersecurity is a community problem, and it's going to take a community effort to start to right things.
Right.
So, yeah, if you go through a breach and you're at a networking event with your peers, don't be afraid to talk about it. It can only help your peers, right? Because they're like, wow, well, I never even thought that something like this could happen to somebody our size, you know?
Yeah.
And you start talking about all the pain that you went through and having to get a hold of your insurance company, and we had to hire a forensics team, and we had to we were down for 14 to 20 days, and I had employees here that were literally just sitting here doing nothing. And it's like, talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's going to help paint the picture for these other folks to start doing the right things for their
Yeah.
businesses. Nobody
Yep.
wants to live through that.
Right.
And if they don't know that it's happening to somebody else in their community, they just think they're fine.
Right. I mean, think about all those things you just said, and think about it being a dentist office or a small healthcare facility, a small doctor's office. Guess who's coming next, right? The HIPAA people are coming in. They're going to want to find out what's going on. They're going to want to know how many records. It just opens up a whole can of worms that nobody really knows the impact. And I know our conversation today is going to be about um, not about this part. We're kind of talking about what happens after that. Um, and that may be another conversation for another day, right? What happens after the breach? Because I don't think people realize they're not just paying a ransom and then it all goes back to normal. It doesn't work
Right.
that way. Just
Right.
doesn't work that way. So,
Well, and even
um,
if they don't pay the ransom, it
yeah,
kind of never
right,
goes back to normal, right?
right, right.
It's like being in a car accident. Your
Yeah,
car is never the same.
yeah, exactly. Right. Yep.
So,
So, yeah, it's
with
it
that being
is.
said, I mean, let's just talk about some of the ways in which a hacker might look at your business
Yeah,
and what they might do to start their attack against you, right? A
yeah,
lot of it really starts around recon.
yep, absolutely.
And recon is honestly, it's not too terribly hard anymore.
No,
It,
it's not.
um, especially with the advent of social media, right? We are in a society now where we pretty much overshare on everything.
Yeah, right. Vacations are on Facebook, all the pictures. I mean, you got little kids and you're posting pictures of your kids. And I'm not saying not, but man, that's where they're getting their information from. They're getting their names, where you went on vacation. Maybe your vacation spot was your password for the year leading up to your vacation. Like, it's insane how much information's out there that people aren't really kind of putting two and two together. And hopefully they start. Hopefully they start.
I know for us when we start an initial engagement with somebody, one of the first things I always look at, I try to put myself in the hacker's shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And try to figure out if I was somebody that was going to attack you as ABC company, what would I look at? And I always start with your DNS records.
Right.
Now, your DNS records, they have to be public in order for things to work on the internet. If you've got an email server and you want to email your customers and you want to receive email, you have to have a DNS record that says, hey, this is the type of server I use. This is the
Mm.
address to that server.
Right.
If you got a website, right? This is our website. This is the domain for it, and that domain resolves to this IP address, right?
Mm-hmm.
So DNS is what allows you to type in abccompany.com rather than the IP address that is the underlying technology behind it, right? And so by looking at your DNS records, I can kind of get a really good idea of the cyber hygiene of your business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the things we primarily focus on the initial engagement is looking at what's called your SPF, your DKIM, and your DMARC records. And SPF is a DNS record that tells all the email servers of the world, hey, these are the servers that I authorize to send on behalf of my domain. And for a while there, SPF was the de facto protection standard for email communication. But it's no longer the case, right? You've
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of folks that are using Office 365 and a lot of folks that are using Google's Workspace, right? The thing is, if you're using these platforms, you pretty much end up with the same SPF record as everybody else in the world using those platforms, right?
Right.
And so that provides little to no protection for you. Um, so SPF kind of aged out, and then DKIM became a next mechanism. And what DKIM does is it digitally signs emails that are leaving your server, and letting the receiving server know, hey, if you receive an email from me from this list of servers that are authorized to send on my behalf, and they're digitally signed by this signature, you should accept it as valid.
Mm-hmm.
DMARC enforces those, right? And so DMARC is like he's like the bouncer sitting at the door. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey,
Right.
you're not on the list of servers and you're not signed here, so you're out, right?
Right.
What we're finding though is a lot of people are either they're not configuring these records, and so your domain is out there ripe for the picking to be abused,
Mm-hmm.
or they're just configuring an SPF record, which again everybody's using all these platforms, so again it's not providing a ton of protection. You might have companies that do realize that SPF and DKIM are important, and they went as far as creating a DMARC policy of what's known as a none policy, right? And the none policy allows you to monitor how emails are being traversed using your domain. Doesn't really provide any protection per se. Still leaves your domain vulnerable to being spoofed, which then can lead to business email compromise,
Mm-hmm.
impersonation attacks,
Right.
ransomware, and other negative impacts against
Right.
your business. Um, so by looking at these records, I can get a pretty good idea of how your hygiene is in your business. We talked with a civil engineering firm, if you remember
Mm.
correctly,
Yep, I do. I remember.
and
Yeah.
we made her aware of this type of situation, right? And they had this vulnerability, and we were challenged. She challenged us. She said, "Well, prove it."
Yep.
I said, "Okay." So 10 minutes later, I wrote a quick little script and I used a marketing platform as my email server so I could see, did the email get delivered? Did it hit her inbox? Did it hit her junk? Where did it go? It hit
Mm-hmm.
her inbox. She opened it 9 times in less than 2 minutes, which tells me she's like, well, shoot, how
Right.
the heck did he do this? Right.
Right.
And the long and short of it with them is they ended up saying, we're aware of the vulnerability and we accept the risk. Now,
Yep.
the question is for you, right? Is this something that you want to mitigate? Are you okay with somebody being able to email your internal staff or even your customers, right? A lot of us are very proud
Mm-hmm.
of the work that we do, and we have testimonials from our customers on our web pages, or we post case studies of how we've been able to transform somebody else's business. Are you okay with leaving your domain vulnerable
Right.
to us being able, or not us, but a hacker
Yeah.
to be able to email your customers and say, "Hey, here's a new invoice. We've changed our banking information. Here's the invoice with our new ACH."
Right. Yeah.
What are the
It happens
implications of that?
happens all the time too. It's happening a lot. Yeah. Yep.
So that might be one way a hacker looks at you. The other thing with looking at these records is in your SPF record, right? We find tons of stale entries when we look at
Mm-hmm.
our prospective customers.
Right.
We found one a couple months back that an IP address is listed in their SPF record. Again, your SPF record is systems that are allowed to email on behalf of your domain. Um, they had a stale IP address that was clearly linked to somebody else at some point and is now an external IP for a webcam for a completely different organization than the one we assessed.
Wow. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, you're really good at finding that stuff, right? You have the technical background and you found some stuff that I've seen. I'm like, oh my gosh. And we've reached out to these people. And again, they just continue to accept that risk. I'm not sure why. I don't know why that is. Um, not even wanting to know about it or fix it or anything. You know what I mean? Like, how do they just go about their business? And sometimes when people are confused about things, they don't understand them enough, they sort of brush them aside. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to take on something new. And that's fine, right? I mean, they can do that, but it's an education piece. And why, as a business owner, why wouldn't you want to know that and fix that right away, right? Your reputation's on the line, your finances are on the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to bring up the fact that I think it's in the most recent Verizon data breach report is 68% of data breaches happen due to um, a non-malicious human interaction with an email, right?
Hmm.
So if I, as a hacker or a hacker in general, right, were to target you as an organization and you've got things misconfigured and I'm able to successfully phish an employee, that could bring it could bring you
Yeah,
to your knees, right? It could bring the
sure.
whole organization to the knees.
Right, right. Well, what was it? 91% of the attacks happen via email. I
Right.
mean, that it's so why wouldn't you learn the basics? To me, it seems like basics. I've learned a lot through you on this, right? So, um, why not get the basics down and get that buttoned up? It's not hard, right? It's not hard and it can be done and it's not going to break the bank. Why wouldn't you want to fix that piece? At least start with something like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think another thing to that's important on this is, we're working with a logistics company. Um, they've got two or three different websites, right? So they've
Hmm.
got different domains for each website. But in working with them, we found out that they own something like 32 domains.
Well, yeah.
And some of the domains, they correlate with the business that they're operating. Some of them are .com, some in .net, some end in .org, but they all have a similar front end, right? And they were having issues with spoofing and spam and all of that, and so we started managing all their domains for them. Well, we found after implementing our solution, the one domain that is not used for anything. No emails are supposed to be sent from it. They don't have a web page tied to it. They don't have any services tied to it. Was being abused literally all over the globe,
Jeez.
and in one day sent, well, attempted to send, right, because we had a solution in
Yeah.
place that stopped it, attempted to send 1,200 emails. And those emails were actually coming back internal to that organization. So there would have been 1,200 emails hitting inboxes of employees. Now, whether they actually hit the inbox or went to spam,
Hmm.
again, that all depends on how they've got things configured.
Right.
Um, but that's a huge barrage of emails hitting your users' inboxes. Are they going to end up clicking one? Who knows?
Who knows,
So
right?
if you've got multiple domains that maybe you're not even using, you still need to protect those as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I
I here,
think,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say, I wanted you to explain, because I know when I first started learning about all this, for me in my brain, I was thinking it was about emails that I was receiving. Like my inbox, well, I've got things stopping things from coming into my inbox. I have things from coming into my inbox. It's not the ones you're receiving, right? Those DNS settings are not for what you're receiving.
Correct.
And I
Yeah.
think maybe clarify that a little bit because I think that's important.
Yeah. The DNS settings that I'm talking about is how outbound email is handled from your domain. So if your domain is abccompany.com, the DNS settings that I'm talking about are to help the recipient email server. So your customers, your prospective customers,
Hmm.
your vendors, and honestly, even yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's telling all those email servers that are going to receive email from your domain how to handle that message once it's received. Um, and I think, you brought up a good point at the beginning of this conversation as far as the social media piece of it, right? Where people are posting pictures of their kids and
Hmm.
their vacation spots and what have you, right? Um, so again, think about it from a hacker's perspective, right? You're posting that you're on vacation,
Right.
so if I'm a hacker and I'm looking at, all right, well, your domain is set up this way where I can impersonate you. You're on vacation. I can use, the help of Chat GPT or some other AI tool to say, I need you to help me write a really convincing and persuading email to the HR department or to the payroll
Mhm.
department or something, right? And
Right.
say, hey, I've got an emergency going on down here. I need you to release funds or something
Right.
weird, right? Something that's
Yeah.
going to catch somebody off guard and they're going to be like, oh, shoot, it's coming from the boss. He must really need it.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. I mean, that's so, it sounds like it'd be something out of a movie, but this is real life now, right? And we're not talking about AI yet, but this is where things are headed, and you got to be on your toes. You got to have your employees on their toes. They need to know what's going on, which security awareness training helps, but it's got to be from the top down on that. Everyone's got to be on board. It's just
Yeah.
something that has to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the important thing to know is, there's so many things that an attacker can look at that does not really take
Hmm.
much effort at all.
Yeah.
A lot of the information about your company is public. A lot of the information is very easily accessible without having to dive into what's known as the dark web, right?
Right.
The dark web is where we get the real juicy information on you, right? Because
Right.
um, the chances of you being compromised in some other way, that's where that information lives, right?
Yeah.
They might have they might have credentials on past or current employees,
Yeah.
right? And so by having information of what I just told you, right, knowing some of your DNS settings, knowing some of the key players in your organization by using social media, going to LinkedIn, going to Facebook, learning about folks' habits, those types of things,
Hmm.
and then having a username and password combo and knowing that there's certain systems that I can look at now that I can start chunking those combos into. What type of access will I eventually get?
Right. Yeah.
What can I do then to continue to evade detection once I'm inside your network?
Right.
I think another thing to mention here, uh, after getting that initial access, um, most companies are breached for like what is it, 227 days before they even know about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's just when they find out. And then it starts from there to try to remediate all that, right? Another 60 or 70 days.
So, yeah, think about having an unauthorized user inside your environment for that amount of time.
Right.
What type of information are they going to gather, right? What type
Yeah.
of data are they going to steal? What
Yeah.
type of other backdoors are they going to install,
Hmm.
right? You might
Exactly.
you might find the one that they came in, but did they leave five others that they can come back?
Yeah. Well, you think about too, is that, like you said, watching everything, they know how a CEO or a AR person, AP person, they know how they communicate via email, right? So they're going to be able to assimilate to that same style. So when somebody gets an email, it looks like it came from that person. It's going to look like Sally sent this email because it's written the way she writes, right? Whether it's grammatical errors or it's all in lowercase or however, just or very blunt to the point, or they're very nice. They see that and they start to learn all that. And it just takes time. And when they're in that long, that's what they're going to find out.
So I think the purpose of this conversation is organizations should be working with teams like us
Hmm.
or even even other MSPs or other MSSPs to have this kind of like put your company under a lens
Right.
and see what are you vulnerable to,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Do some
And why
assessment.
not
Yeah.
why not have a proactive hack by somebody that is out there to help you handle it,
Right.
rather than leaving yourself vulnerable to an actual threat actor and then living some of the worst time of your life,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Affecting your business, your customers, your employees. I mean, at the end of the day, you're affecting a lot of lives by not
Yeah.
doing so, right?
Right. Yep. Well, we're talking about businesses. Look at all the schools that are starting to get breached. I mean, now you're talking about kids' information. I mean, think about an elementary school. Now the kids' names, their emails out there, their social security number, all that information the school is holding. That kid's now 8 years old. All their stuff is out on the dark web. Um, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating when we see that because this stuff can be prevented, at least reduced, right? At least bring it down to where you can stop it in time, where not everything is out on the dark web.
Yeah.
And it just seems like the budget comes in after the breach, right? We
Yeah.
talk to them and they're like, well, we gotta wait, we gotta wait. Wait till what? You get breached? There was a meme that I saw, and I think I saw it this morning again, but it was a guy sitting at a table with stacks of $100 bills, and it said that's the budget after a security. That's the cybersecurity budget after a breach, right? Before they're like, oh, that's in our last conversation we were talking about it being an expense. Yeah, but you're preventing something, right? You have to mitigate the risk of that because the impact is so huge, and we start talking about impact again, but going back to the beginning of this, it's all the information they need to hack you is already out there right now because your people are putting it out there, right?
Yep.
You talk about DNS settings, that not being done right, very easily spoofed, very easily impersonated. Um, these are simple things that people are not realizing is going to affect them down the road somewhere, and it can be prevented.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you said about education, it's so true because I think in the last year, um, th- there's been at least 20 that I can remember off the top of my head,
Yeah.
um, that have had issues. I think the biggest one was the Minnesota or Minneapolis public schools. Um, that was a big one for them.
Mm.
I think it was all of their staff and all of their students.
Wow.
PII was breached in that
Jeez.
incident.
Yeah. Well, we've done the assessments that we're doing. People are saying, well, our stuff's in the cloud. We don't have anything on we don't save anything on our laptops. We don't do anything. And then we show them like, well, whose tax returns are all these?
Right.
Oh, wait a minute. What? I'm like, yeah, and it's not encrypted. It's just sitting there. It's got everybody's information on it. So it's just interesting that people have that, I don't know, sense of security that because it's in the cloud that they're safe. And it's a false sense of security.
Yeah. The cloud is just somebody else's computer.
I know. I said that to somebody the other day, and they were like, "Where, what? What do you mean?" I'm like, "It's just a computer. It'd be like the computer was sitting in your neighbor's house, and you could connect to it. Like, that's all it is."
Right.
But that's an education thing, right? And I don't know if when all that came about, cloud came about, they talked about ease of use and more, you could start to do business from anywhere, and they portrayed it as this really great thing, which it is. I'm not saying it's not, but those companies are also not taking any liability for your data. You are still responsible for your data, which is interesting.
Right. Yep.
So,
Yeah, I think it boils down to, like what I said earlier was all these platforms, they're shared platforms, right?
hmm
So
hmm
especially if you're using Office 365 and again in Google Workspace, I mean there's many others,
yeah,
QuickBooks,
oh yeah, all the ERP
Sage, all
stuff,
all that
everything,
stuff.
yeah, all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yep.
Um, so you end up with similar records to just about everybody else,
hmm
and and again, with it being a shared platform, you are still responsible for your data. I mean, just take a look at the actual T's and C's of all these
Yeah.
platforms, right?
Right.
They're going to hold you responsible for the data, not
Right.
necessarily the other way around.
Yeah. Well, who reads T's and C's? I mean, come on.
Well, It's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, that's for sure.
Well, and it's just funny when you go to like even public Wi-Fi. Do you accept the terms and conditions? You think someone's going to take 10 minutes and read all that to just because they want to get on the Wi-Fi and check their email? No, they're just like, okay, whatever. Like, and it's so nonchalant anymore.
Yeah. Yep. So I think, to wrap up this conversation, I would say it's important for most organizations to consider going through some type of risk assessment.
Hmm.
If you're in a regulated industry, you probably are supposed to be doing pen testing annually.
Right.
Whether or not you're doing it, that's that's a whole nother question. But um, to know where your vulnerabilities live and doing it proactively has so much benefit to you as an organization. The cost of doing something like that is so much more advantageous than the cost of trying to recover after
Right.
being hit.
Right. And I think that could be another conversation for us to have is to talk about the impact of a breach, right? Because there is so many things that happen. I mean, you watch what happens with like CDK Global, United Health, all the things that they're going through. And you think that's the only, do you think that's the only company? It only happens to the big companies. That same process happens to the little company. And it's like, well, why would they do all that? Because that's the process, right? That's what happens. And you could be a small dentist office, you're going to fall under the microscope of HIPAA compliance,
Yeah.
and they're going to want to see what goes on, and then you talk about individual fines and all these things. Like it's just a big snowball, and not enough businesses understand the impact of a breach.
Yeah, the important piece of that too, right, is the organizations you just discussed.
Hmm.
They are, and this kind of ties back into our last podcast
Yeah,
of they've got huge budgets. They've got huge teams
yeah,
and they still had an issue.
yeah. Right.
You're a small business.
Yep.
You're not budgeting for it generally.
Right.
You don't have the teams. You don't have the expertise.
Yep.
So it's definitely something to consider investing in,
Hmm.
and do it now. Have somebody that's on the good side take a look at your environment from a
Yep.
hacker's eye and then build a plan on how to mitigate it.
Yep. Exactly.
Don't wait until
Don't.
after
Right.
a hacker looks at
Yeah.
you and says, "Oh, well, they're ripe for the picking. Here
Well,
we
they
go."
got nothing. Sure. Right. Let's make our way in here, you know? So, yeah. Well, these are all great points. I mean, especially just again, this is educational. We want people to know the things that they can do to protect themselves, their businesses, their employees, their livelihood, their financial, like their reputation. All that comes into play. And you said it perfectly. You got to start somewhere. Start now, right? Start doing it now.
And do you have any closing statement on this?
Um, the only thing I would just say is, same thing starting now, right? You can draw a line in the sand right now and say, you know what? We haven't done anything, but I do want to start. And you talked about a pen test, you talked about vulnerability assessment. Start there because it'll help leadership understand what needs to be done. If you have an IT person, they can have a little roadmap now to say, okay, these are the things I can do. If they can't do those things, bring somebody in that can help do those things. But at least now you'll have some form of a plan that will get you on the journey towards cybersecurity protection.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really have anything else to add to that. Um, it's just critically important to consider at this point,
Yeah. Yep.
because the attacks aren't slowing down.
Right. Exactly.
They've only sped up, and the quantity has only grown over the years. So yeah, take
Yeah.
take the time to act now.
Sounds good.
Well, that's it for this week's C-Suite Cyber Podcast. We're Dan and Aaron, and we will catch you next time.
See ya.
See ya.